and read this headline: in another country, president the president arrests political opponents ahead of election, purges courts of dissenting judges, and deploys federal agents to patrol the Capitol. You would say that's authoritarian democracy in collapse. But this isn't a headline from Hungary or the Philippines. It's America 2025, where the very people that we expect to uphold our institutions are reshaping them for one man's convenience. Now, tonight on the Beard Signal, we're going to expose how this isn't a breakdown. It's a deliberate breakdown. It's on purpose, and how the scaffolding of authoritarianism is being erected from within, and why you might already be conditioned to accept it. So, let's just start from the top, right? Every authoritarian regime has followed a similar 5-point script. I went over this in another episode, but I'm going to go over it again, all right? So, political scientist Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. Ziblatt. I always mess up his name. I apologize. Identified these as how democracies die. First, delegitimize the opposition. Opponents then become traitors. You then undermine the judiciary. So courts must serve the executive, not the Constitution. Third, controlling or discrediting the media. So if you can't control the press, destroys credibility. Then you weaponize the legal system. Law becomes a tool against dissent. And then you rewrite the rules. The rule books get tilted in your favor. Now, let's just match this little playbook to what's actually happening now. First off, delegitimization. Political opponents are not just wrong, they're the enemies of the people. Do you remember a certain someone saying that? Because Trump said that overwhelmingly all the time. Now, part two, judicial undermining. Now, Trump has fast-tracked, appellate judges and recently nominated Rebecca Tableton, Kavanaugh. She was what is his name? Scalia. Sorry, blanked on a second there. Kavanaugh and Scalia clerk. All right. Now, continuing his war on the judiciary's independence. Then you also have Emile Bove's narrow confirmation for the Third Circuit, against warnings from former judges, mind you, showing loyalty prioritized over qualifications, which he's done through his entire cabinet this time around, which is why he's a lot more unhinged than the first time. The first time he had plenty of people that are still around him that said, you might want to tamper that. But now they're gone. There's only loyalists in his inner circle. So the other thing you need to look at is in immigration courts, over 50 judges were abruptly fired, many still under probation, mind you, even as judges with defense-oriented backgrounds were replaced with enforcement-friendly appointees. Third, media control. Now, as you already know, news outlets are always labeled fake and reporters are harassed overwhelmingly, especially when truth becomes relative, right? At least under this administration, heavily. So if it's not what he wants, it's fake news. If it's exactly what he wants, best reporters ever. Come on. You can't even pretend like you don't see that. Then you have weaponization. So the DOJ now sued over 15 federal judges in Maryland to halt a deportation stay, risking a separation of powers crisis, which has already been kind of proven, and we're already in that. Now, in one case, a court order to halt deportations was actually full-on defied, and Trump-appointed judges overturned a contempt finding over procedural ambiguity. And then you also have rule rewriting. So Trump revoked 72 federal directives without notice, reshaping policy unilaterally. So let's just look at a couple, historical parallels, all right? First and foremost, Hungary's Viktor Orban used legal and media structures to consolidate power under the guise of anti-corruption. And Franco's Spain equated political dissent with heresy, and the law and judiciary served the state, not justice. So the conclusion is basically that the blueprint is being followed here, and we're living it full blown. And you can't be of any kind of sound object mind and not see that and understand exactly what's happening here. And the problem is, there's an entire wing of our entire system that is literally rooting it on. So when you have two groups, when this is a bipartisan, government with two groups that are in charge of it, and one literally doesn't care about the rule books anymore, you run out of options for the other side. It doesn't really work if only one side wants democracy. And even then, there's other things about Democrats that are pretty horrible when you think about it. And I went over that in another episode as well. But still, the bottom line is authoritarian gaslight patterns are pretty straightforward. All right, they include things like overload the public with lies until facts become more fluid. Right, they feel more like, it might be real, it might not be. Overload the public with lies, or as Trump's sycophants say, flood the zone. And that's happening daily, which is why I don't want to be making political commentary here, but this is basically turned into it because this is such a 5-alarm fire constantly, daily, all the time. So the second thing they do is deny events that happened. Force citizens to basically doubt their senses. Started with January 6th, then a whole bunch of other things just happened over and over again. Things like, that's not really what's happening. Saying that, no, it's the, National Guard in LA. It's peacekeeping. No, it's not. It's completely not peacekeeping. No one sees it as peacekeeping. They also have create an alternative reality where only the leader defines the truth. And again, fake news, if it's not what he likes, it's dead on if it's what he likes. And again, that also happens when you take, a labor secretary who has been here for 20 years doing this stuff and just been like, I didn't like the job numbers you put out, even though she doesn't make the job numbers. That's what comes in. So regardless. Now, again, evidence in action. You have January 6th, we witnessed a violence live. And yet within days, the GOP's talking points suggested that it was a peaceful protest, Antifa infiltration, or FBI orchestration. In a Univision town hall, Trump actually called it a day of love. Vice President Kamala Harris called his rewriting of history and rewriting of that particular moment, especially, gaslighting on live TV. Trump's false and misleading statements have now become completely routine, rewriting narrative at scale. It's you just say the false thing long enough, people eventually start to be like, maybe it was, even though your eyes saw it. Nothing can defy what you saw on January 6th, 2021. Nothing can defy it because you saw it. They were running for their lives, all of them, because they knew there was a gallows erected for Mike Pence. There's a reason that he doesn't have the same vice president this time, because literally he tried to kill him. And then for the historical thinker, Anna Arendt called this organized lying designed to erode trust in reality itself. All right. And the impact, if facts seem optional, then truth becomes whatever you want to believe. And that is authoritarianism's like psychological footprint, straight up. Now, here's the thing. The No Kings protests weren't just symbolic. All right. They were a historical pushback. They're rooted in the 50-51 movement. 50 states, 50 protests, one movement. And Americans mobilized across nearly 2,000 towns and cities on June 14th, the No King's Day of Defiance, right? Against authoritarian parade in D.C. Now, one estimate suggests that it was among the largest single-day protests in American history. Across the country, clergy marched with protesters calling immigration raids fascist and terroristic. And there's a reason why this matters, all right? In other democratic backslides, dissent is recorded as disorder. That's what they do. In the Philippines, student protests were deemed communist terrorists. Again, does that rhetoric ring a bell to you? In Turkey, academics were jailed under terrorism laws for teaching what really happened. And right now, again, they're trying to rewrite history. If you forgot, Trump basically sent out a thing to the Smithsonian saying you need to rewrite history in my view of it. And that's fucked up because history doesn't give a rat's ass about your view. It is what it is. So right now, peaceful protests is being surveyed, dismissed, or even criminalized, even as slogans like "No Kings" are reframed as threats. Now, this is not dissent, it's authoritarian suppression and optical camouflage. Straight up, simple as can be. And the whole anti-woke crusade wasn't just a culture war, it was an ideological armor that they used. The anti-woke narrative reframed civil rights discourse as moral decay or evoking fear or rallying conservative identity, right? Conservative nationalism, research actually reveals it's the strongest predictor of supporting suppression and democratic norms during emergencies. And this is including delaying elections or, disregarding checks and balances on that front. And frankly, again, if anyone who's actually read the damn Bible, you know that Christian nationalism is as far from Christ-like as you could possibly humanly be. And the Trump administration has placed Christian nationalists in key roles, pushing religious messaging into public schools and civic spaces, eroding pluralism under spiritual guardrails, which is against the freaking Constitution because you're putting your ideology in the main view and locking out everything else. You can't establish a religion, but they're doing it against the Constitution because they don't give a rat's ass about the Constitution. Now, again, historical echoes of this. Franco's Spain basically fused Catholicism and state power, and then opposition was heresy. That's just how it worked. Authoritarian regimes often cloak themselves as religious legitimacy to fracture moral resistance. That's just how they do it. In short, faith gets weaponized, and faith in authority, not in governance or democracy. That's it. So authoritarianism doesn't just explode in one bright light. It like leaks. All right. The Patriot Act, introduced as temporary after 9/11 back in 2001, became a fixture of U.S. surveillance. Orban in Hungary declared temporary emergency powers in 2015, and today it's still effective. He's effectively president for life. And again, current parallels: Trump deploys 800 guard troops in D.C., even as violent crime is at its lowest, framing it as public safety necessity. Similarly, deployed in L.A., 3,800 National Guard and 700 Marines, was framed as peacekeeping, but critics warned it's a breach of civil military norms. Anyone that has worked in the military saw this and went, "The fuck you doing, dude?" Because that's not how you use it. And again, the people that used to be in Trump's orbit the first term that said, like, yeah, you can't use the military in that way. It's supposed to be a last-ditch effort if you really need it. He's taking that and is basically saying, "Fuck you, I want to do it my own way." And he's put people that won't go against him now. Full stop. That's the only way to look at it because that's what's happening. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. Then, Senator Tom Cotton publicly called for invoking the Insurrection Act to deploy troops to quell protests. All right? The Insurrection Act, which is a loophole to Posse Comitatus, not Pussy Comitatus, as the one guy said, which is frankly hilarious, but Posse Comitatus gives the president almost unlimited domestic deployment power. All right? So that's what the Insurrection Act does as a way around it. And again, each deployment, each temporary emergency is a wedge. The door is cracked, and history says it doesn't close easily. Now, this is democracy's stress test. it's a complacency as default failure, right? So here's your playbook. If you give a rat's ass about this country, if you give a rat's ass about the Constitution and the rights and norms that are supposed to be here that have been eroded by Republicans for decades now, piece by piece by piece, here's your playbook for resistance. First and foremost, vote. Every level of government counts, even local elections where democracy lives and dies. Support your independent journalism. Truth is your weapon. Now, also show up as protests, school board meetings, town halls. Visibility matters. And lastly, you want to build community. Authoritarianism thrives in isolation. Solidarity is the antidote. Do it, use it. And in 20 years, when someone asks you what you did while democracy trembled, what will you say? You sat it out or that you stood up? Make your choice. If you give a rat's ass about this country, show it. Because too many people today are showing that they don't care about America, America's values, and the things that America stands for. And it makes me sick. And I don't like to say that I'm an American right now because we look horrible in the world's eyes. We look horrible today. There's no possible way that anyone out there is looking at America going, great job, guys. Everyone in Europe and the entire civilized world is going, oh, God, not this again. Because it's so much worse this time. And with that, this is a shorter one. This has been the Beard Signal. I'm JP Dunphy. Stay loud, stay unafraid, because there are no kings here, only the people.